Hi everyone, my name is Maddy Wierenga and I'm a first year MPH student in the Nutrition Science Department, and today I'm taking you through one of my favorite meal prep recipes, pork tacos with an apple slaw mix. Now I paid about $20 in total for all of the ingredients, which equates to about $1.50 per taco, and that'll last me all, if not most, of the week. Now I'll end up with more pork taco mix than I will apple slaw mix, which gives me a bonus dinner at the end of the week. And I'll usually turn that into something like a stir fry. When people hear that I say that I'm using pork for this taco, they get really nervous because pork is traditionally thought of as a fattier meat compared to something like chicken or beef. But the government actually classifies pork as an extremely lean meat, which is about the same amount of fat content as a chicken breast. Pork also has other very nutritious aspects to them, such as thiamine, which is key for the metabolism of proteins, carbs, and fats. It's also very high in phosphorus, which is very good for strengthening of your bones. Before I started meal prepping, cooking stressed me out because it took way too much time every day, and I just didn't know how to cook for one person. Now that I meal prep, I'm able to save more time, I can feed myself better, and I enjoy cooking more. This recipe in particular is really great because we put it in a crock pot and let that cook throughout the day, which gives me time to get things done. Like I do my homework, I can have some meetings, I can walk my dog, and then when I come back, it's basically done. It's also really great because it doesn't taste like. The ingredients we'll be using are a pork tenderloin, mine was about 3.5 pounds, a coleslaw mix, a green apple, cilantro, corn taco shells, olive oil mayo, lemon or lime juice, and garlic powder, seasoned salt, and black pepper. Some people will have hesitancies with the olive oil mayo, but olive oil mayo is healthier than regular mayo because it has heart-healthy monosaturated fats, and fats help promote satiety and are important for fat-soluble vitamins. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is cook the pork. I will be seasoning it with seasoned salt, garlic powder, and black pepper. There are a couple ways to go ahead and cook this. I'm going to go and put it in a crock pot on low for about 8 hours. Otherwise, you can put it on high for about 5. If you don't have a crock pot, you can put it in the oven. You would put the oven at 275 degrees, and you'd put it in a tin that would be able to collect water because it will lose a lot of liquid as you cook it. And you will cook it in the oven for 2 to 3 hours at 275 degrees. So usually I just cover the porks generously with seasoned salt, just so it's at least covered. Do the same for the garlic powder. And lastly, the same thing with the black pepper. Just so that the tops of the pork are covered. From here, I will go ahead and put them into the crock pot. Put it on low, and then cover it, leave it alone for about 8 hours. You'll know when the pork is done, regardless of the method, when you can take a fork and shred it very easily. There should be minimal effort. So about 8 hours later, cooking it on low, I pulled the pork out of the crock pot. You'll know it's ready when you're able to just touch it and it falls apart. From here, you'll take 2 forks and shred it. To make the green apple slaw mix, we're going to first start by cutting up an apple. We're going to want to cut the apple into about 1 inch matchsticks. Once you have the apple cut up into 1-inch matchsticks, I cut mine at various lengths at that point to add some texture. You're going to go ahead and put it into a gallon Ziploc bag. This helps save on messes and gets it ready for easy storage. From here, we're going to go ahead and get our lime juice ready. You can either use bottled lime or lemon juice or a fresh lemon or lime. I have this handy in the fridge, so I'm going to go ahead and use this. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the bag with the apples. This helps keep them staying fresh and keeping them from browning throughout the week. Go ahead and give the bag a little shake and mix those up so the juice is kind of coating the apples. From here, we're going to go ahead and add the coleslaw mix, just a pre-made bag of slaw mix. Add the whole bag into the gallon Ziploc bag. Go ahead and give that a seal and mix that up. Next, we're going to go ahead and add the mayonnaise. Go ahead and close that up, and again, mix that thoroughly throughout. Once that has been mixed in, we're going to go ahead and add 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. Up our cilantro. We're going to finely chop this up. We need about 1/4 cup of chopped cilantro. Once that is nicely chopped, go ahead and add it to your bag. Next, we're going to go ahead and add just a dash of the seasoned salt. Go ahead and use a measuring spoon, about 1/4 teaspoon. Add that to your bag. From here, we're going to go ahead and close it up and mix it all together. And voila, you've made your apple slaw. The reason why I like making it in the Ziploc bag, it makes for easy mixing, less dishes to clean up, and you can go ahead and store this in the fridge when you're done. Step is to prep the pork for the tacos. We'll be doing 2 steps here and 1. We will first need a small saucer pan for the tortilla shells for when we heat them up, and a second larger pan for the amount of pork we're going to cook for that day. I'm going to start by putting our tortilla shell onto a pan. Keeping an eye on that. You're going to want to flip it when it turns brown. And while that's warming up, we're going to go ahead and get started on our pork. I usually take anywhere from 1 to 2 cups of pork, depending on how much I want to eat that day. This will get me probably around 5 to 6 tacos. So I'm going to go ahead and put some of this into our pan. You don't need to grease it or anything. It should get nice and crispy. And from here, we're going to add some more seasonings. Normally, I just eyeball it and taste test as I go. This is a very informal process, but for those of you who want some measurements, I'll usually do I would guide about a tablespoon of garlic powder and a teaspoon of seasoned salt and a teaspoon of black pepper. And then just mix it all up so it all gets covered in some nice seasoning. This is where most of our flavor is going to come from with the pork. This is what the pork should look like when it's done. I had it on medium heat for about 3 to 4 minutes. Then I turned it off and just let it sit here. And while the pan was hot, it got a little bit extra crispy, which I really enjoy, these little crispy bits. And then this is what a tortilla shell looks like when you don't burn it. From here, we're gonna go ahead and assemble our tacos. Grab our shell and grab a healthy amount of meat. We're gonna grab our apple slaw mix and add that to our taco. And your taco is perfectly fine like this. If you're like me and love cilantro, I'll go ahead and garnish it with some extra cilantro sprig. And I personally like some kick to my tacos, so I'll go ahead and add some hot sauce. This is personally my favorite hot sauce. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of that on top. And voila, you have a taco. You need to take this meal to go. It is perfect for that. You'll just do everything we just did, either the night before or the morning of, and take your pork however much you want to take with you for the day, and put those into your favorite to-go container or ziploc baggie. So we're gonna pack up some pork, and then we're gonna go ahead and do the same with our apple slaw mix. For our shells, you'll go ahead and still toast them the morning of or the night before and pack those to go. I usually eat about 3 tacos per serving, so I would recommend packing 3 taco shells. And there you go, you have a nice meal to go. Now this meal is good, hot or cold, so if you have a microwave, feel free to heat up the pork again. If you don't, the pork is still good cold. And that is all I have for you guys for now. Stay tuned for some vegetarian-friendly tips.
Hi everybody, you're probably here because you've just watched Maddie's cooking demo for pork tacos. And I just want to go over a plant-based alternative taco filling. If you don't eat meat, if you don't eat pork, or you're just interested in some plant-based alternatives and some cost-saving alternatives. So I'm going to walk through tempeh, tofu, and black beans, combine them into what I think is the best alternative filling for her taco recipe, and then give some general cooking tips and some general seasoning tips. But at the end of the day, it's really up to you. Please excuse the angle in my home kitchen here. And you're mostly not going to look at me. You're going to look at my cooking space. Okay. So just to give a little bit of background to kick it off, the base of our taco filling is going to be tempeh, which I know not a lot of people are familiar with, but tempeh is a fermented soy product like tofu, except that it is whole fermented soybeans instead of pressed unfermented soy milk. So tempeh often comes in packages like this, and it's going to typically come in about 8 ounces. This is from Fresh Thyme. Your Whole Foods, your Fresh Thymes are always going to carry them, but probably the least expensive place to find tempeh is Trader Joe's, at least locally, where one 8-ounce package like this is about $2. At the more expensive stores, you're going to see more of a $3 to $4 range, depending on the weekly sales. but one serving contains 18 grams of protein, and this is about 2.5 servings. And the way we're going to use this for the taco filling, it's going to make way more than 2.5 tacos. So at that point, we're getting a lot of protein, a lot of fiber for a pretty low cost. Tofu, on the other hand, is going to be much cheaper, which gives us a little bit of some cost flexibility with the recipe overall. And tofu is going to come in a pressed block. Right now, I just have 3 slices because I have been recipe testing all week. So if you slice them out of the block, the tofu is going to look like this. And we are going to press it today to remove some of the moisture. If you're cooking tofu into large pieces, it's sometimes advisable to drain it for a couple hours or overnight before you do cook it to help remove some of that additional moisture. Because we're going to be crumbling our tofu into a cooked down taco filling, we're a little bit less worried about removing moisture ahead of time. We're also going to work with some black beans. These are canned. Obviously, they are in a separate container now because I've been recipe testing, but just any canned black bean will work. You could also start with the dried black beans and soak and cook them ahead of time. That can sometimes be even less expensive. And I always recommend looking for a low sodium option and at least rinsing those black beans before I use them to reduce some of that additional sodium, especially because you're going to season your taco filling anyway. So you're going to make sure that it tastes the way you want it to. Okay, so I'm working with a big wok today, just because it's going to be the easiest way for me to not spill while I look back and forth and try to talk about what I'm doing. Any pan will work that fits the amount of taco filling that you're trying to make. And my base oil for cooking today is going to be an avocado oil because it does have a higher smoke point than our typical olive oil. And we're going to want to start this tempeh at high heat so we can get a nice crisp to it. So I'm just going to kick it off with a couple tablespoons of avocado oil. I'm probably going to do that more than once. And turn my burner to high heat. And while that's heating up, I'm going to open this tempeh package. I'm going to make all of it for now because I'm going to drop off some tacos for some friends, port style, COVID style, of course. But this will keep in the fridge for up to a week if you do just want to cook a smaller amount at a time. Note that these air-sealed packages usually have 2 layers of plastic. So there's another layer on here that I do need to cut off. And unlike when we're cooking meat, we don't need to worry about using a meat thermometer or looking for a minimum internal temperature for the soybeans. That takes a little pressure off the cooking process. We're just going to look for the crisp and flavor that we're going for in the taco filling. Okay. So the whole block looks like this. In restaurants, a lot of times you're going to see tempeh cut into triangles and fried until the outside is crispy. We're going to go for a crumble for this taco filling, especially because we are going to include other plant-based elements. So personally, I think the easiest way is just to break it up with my hands as I drop it in the pan. We're probably going to get a nice sizzle right away. And if I don't break it up enough as I go, that's okay. That's going to be the role of the spatula as I get a nice crisp. I personally love tempeh. I think it's a little bit less common for home use than tofu is, but I just don't love tofu that much, which is also why I wanted to challenge myself to incorporate it into this recipe because it is so low cost. Both are really awesome sources of plant protein. And I thought maybe I could combine something I love with something that typically isn't a staple in my kitchen and test it on some soy protein naive friends who typically are meat eaters who gave me some awesome feedback and gave a thumbs up on this recipe. The other challenge was to come up with an alternative that would be comparable enough to Maddy's pork recipe. that it's going to be a good fit with the green apple slaw and the corn tortilla, which in and of itself has a pretty strong flavor. So I'm just going to tip this up. This is the full crumbled tempeh block. And I'm just going to move that around. It's sizzling, and I don't know if you guys can hear that. I'm going to break up the larger pieces. And it's really up to you how much of a crisp you want to get going on the tempeh. The feedback I got was that the crispier the tempeh, the better the overall flavor of the taco, especially with that pretty strong corn tortilla flavor. So I'm going to go for a pretty crispy tempeh here today because I'm going to drop some off for my boyfriend, who is a pretty religious meat eater himself, but asked if I could bring some more over. So I actually might add a little bit more avocado oil. And what I'm going to do is aim for about 70% the level of crisp that I want in the end before I add my other components. Tip this up for you guys so you can see a little bit. You can't see the browning super well on the camera here, but it's pretty obvious as soon as the outside layer does start to crisp up. And so we just want to keep stirring to make sure we get a nice even cook on these. I'm going to add a little bit more avocado oil. Obviously, using more oil to get a crispier tempeh in the beginning is going to add a little bit of fat to your recipe. The good news is this recipe is very rich in plant fats and has no animal fat. So we're not too worried. It's very low in saturated fat overall. Fat also is an awesome vehicle for those fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K that might be incorporated through the veggie aspects of your taco topping. And fat plays a really important role in satiety as well. So if you're packing this lunch and trying to stay full until dinner, traveling to and from campus or work, that can play a really great role in fat. So while I let this continue to crisp, the other step I'm going to do is actually press my tofu a little bit. Let me see if I can make this visible for the camera. I've just got some clean paper towels here. And I'm going to go ahead and, with my hand, just press firmly down. I'm not worried about warping the shape or the form of the tofu here because I'm going to crumble it entirely. I just want to get a little bit of this extra moisture out. I've got a couple extra paper towels here. Just going to get a little extra moisture out ahead of time, although the rest of it will cook out when we crumble it into the pan. Okay, so you can see those look a little bit more flat now. I'm not getting as much moisture when I press down. These guys are looking pretty good. I'm getting some significant browning in some areas. I don't think I need any more oil. So I'm getting to the point where I'm actually going to go ahead and add my tofu. So personally, I think the easiest way is just to go ahead and crumble it right in. Of course, I washed my hands before I started, cleaned my workstation. So I'm just going to take the tofu block and crumble it. And my spatula is going to break it up pretty easily as well when I continue stirring. Once we season, the tofu is pretty well disguised by the rest of the taco filling because it is going to be very broken up. And the tempeh has a much nuttier flavor and a much firmer texture, so it's going to really stand out. Like I said, tofu is about half the price of tempeh. So this is a great way to reduce the overall cost of the recipe. Rinse that tofu off my hands a little bit there. And I'm going to stir to incorporate it. Oh yeah, my tempeh is looking really crispy now. So you can really work with any ratio of tempeh to tofu to black beans. I want tempeh to be sort of the main act here, but I also like the flavor and the texture of the black beans. And I like the way that tofu reduces the cost of my recipe. So I'm going to do about a 4 to 3 to 3 ratio of tempeh to tofu to black beans. But it's totally up to you. I turn my heat down a little bit because everybody's looking pretty crispy in there. And I'm going to go ahead and add my black beans. You'll notice that I'm really not measuring because I've been testing this all week. I wanted to use the rest of that can of black beans. And I know my audience is going to be fine with it. Okay, so now that we're incorporating the beans and the tofu, I am going to go ahead and start seasoning. So I'm not going to tell you specifically how much of each seasoning to use because it's really going to depend on your total volume of taco filling. I've got a lot going on here because I'm going to feed a couple different people. But I'll walk you through the seasonings that were popular with my taco testers this week and recommend the ones that I think really make the taco work with that green apple slaw if you choose to use it. So first off, we're just going to do a little bit of salt and pepper. I'm going to go easy on the salt because I don't want my overall recipe to be too high in sodium and because I'm going to use other seasonings to add a lot of flavor. This is just some cracked pepper. I think it belongs in everything. I'm going to make sure to stir periodically as I do season. Sorry, I just inhaled some pepper there. So I don't cook any of my tempeh too much on one side. I want the crisp, but I don't want the burn. So those are the basics. And speaking of items that I think belong in every recipe, garlic. So you can use dried garlic powder. You can use those cans of fresh chopped garlic. You can chop your own fresh garlic. Today I've got some garlic paste because I knew I was going to be experimenting with garlic all week and I knew that this would be an easy option. Personally, I don't think it's possible to use too much garlic. Some folks might disagree with me. I'm going to go garlicky on this one. And I can really tell I've just added garlic. Now I can smell it. And that smells awesome. Okay. So another showstopper here in terms of flavor that's going to go really well with the green apple slaw is onion powder. Again, if you're interested in using fresh onions, go for it. Feel free to experiment. I'm going to recommend a heavy hand in onion powder and a heavy hand in chili powder if you have it lying around. I tested a couple different spice combinations on my friends and they all liked the recipes that were highest in chili powder the best. I think that little kick just works really nicely with the mayo and the sweetness of the green apple slaw. If you don't like slaw, if you don't like mayo, or if you're going for a vegan taco, that's totally fine. So my alternate suggestion is going to be just to add diced tomatoes and a lime wedge to the top instead. The acid and the moisture is going to work really well with this taco filling. So the acid will bring out the flavor and help it stand up against that strong flavor of the corn tortilla. And the moisture, I think, is pretty necessary. The one thing that's really hard to replicate in a plant-based taco compared to something like pork is that moisture that you get from the meat itself. So the other two that I'm going to add in a smaller quantity are cumin. It works nicely with the chili and the onion powder, and I personally love cumin. I like it on my popcorn. but I know that's not a popular opinion, and cayenne. Cayenne you'll want to go pretty light on if you don't like things that are spicy, especially because the chili powder is in there. I like a little spice, and I think it's complemented really nicely by the slaw, so I'm going to go for it. Now, on top of those seasoning steps, I can't emphasize enough that the most important move is to try the filling as you go along. So I can always add more spice. I can always add more seasoning. I can't take it away. You are the best judge of what you're working with here. You could even have a little taco and a little slaw on the side if you want to get super fancy with your testing as you move along. I'm just going to grab a clean spoon from the drawer. Get a little tempeh, get a little black bean, get a little tofu on here. I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm going to try not to burn myself, and I'm going to decide how I'm doing on seasonings here. Okay, I'm going to make sure I drop that spoon in the sink so I don't accidentally use it again, because I am cooking for other people. And I think I need a little bit more onion, a little more chili, and a little more cayenne. It's not quite spicy enough for me. Get in here with the onion, the chili, and just a little dash of cayenne again. And as I've been cooking it down, oh, I need to stop leaning over and inhaling right after I drop my seasoning in. I'm going to hit it with a little half tablespoon of avocado oil. If you really like the flavor of olive oil and you want to add that additional moisture at the end, you can always turn your heat down and just add it toward the end. That's totally fine too. Okay, it's looking pretty cooked to me. I'm going to turn my heat off and try one more bite just to make sure that I'm happy with my final seasoning combination. Clean spoon. Get a little tempeh, get a little black beans, a little tofu. And I'm throwing things on the floor. Let's see. I think that's perfect. That works for me. I know my boyfriend's going to be happy with it, and I'm feeling good. So I'm just going to let this cool down, pop it in the fridge for later. And this afternoon, I'll have a nice snack with some of that green apple slaw. And I'll bring my boyfriend some tomatoes because he doesn't like mayo. Thanks, guys. Hope that helped. And check out the separate recipe for some tips on cooking tempeh and where to find it at the lowest cost. Thanks.